BADLAND is about two reservists who come back from Iraq. One character, Jerry, sort of commits a very heinous crime at the beginning of the film, and then escapes with his youngest daughter, winds up in another town, and tries to rebuild his life. When he meets me, I play Max, and Max has also just come back from Iraq. The two become sort of friends. Jerry tries to help Max figure out how to re-enter the world, only to find out that Max is the sheriff of the town, which puts them obviously at odds because of the crime that Jerry has committed. And things begin to sort of fall apart very rapidly after that discovery. Jerry is a younger man who's living at the bottom of the barrel. He's sort of living in literally a garbage heap of old cars, and things are not going well for him at all. As I say, he commits a terrible crime and he comes to another town, and he meets Max, and Max is a man who has just come back from Iraq and literally almost cannot stand on his own 2 feet. He is falling apart minute by minute. He begins to drink heavily. He has the shakes because of his experience in Iraq. He looks to Jerry for help, and is trying to sort of make a friend of Jerry, only to find out that Jerry has committed a terrible crime. Max turns out to be the sheriff of the town and doesn't quite know now how to handle this situation, and then begins to handle it very badly, which ultimately ends with Max's demise. Because I think it's important for people to understand what happens to soldiers in general when they are put in such brutal circumstances. For years and years and years, we've had movies about soldiers who return home, and it's always been kind of a glorified kind of thing. They return home heroes. They take off their uniforms, they put on their suits, and they sort of manage to get back into the world and sort of be upright citizens. Until there was a wonderful film called The Best Years of Their Lives, where suddenly we began to investigate that no, that doesn't quite happen. That it's a very difficult thing if you've been killing people for years to suddenly come home and have a normal life. And I think that's an important thing for people to recognize, that we throw our men and women into situations that are completely untenable, and we throw them into those situations for long periods of time. And then we expect them to sort of turn around and be normal citizens when they come home. And the trauma is just too great. When you train to be a soldier, especially with the kind of combat that you face in Iraq, some of it is using a high-powered rifle and shooting across walls, but a lot of it is close up. A lot of it is watching your friends and your compatriots being blown to bits, either by roadside bombs or by someone carrying a bomb on their own person and being blown up, or somebody being shot next to you. And one of the small, terrible things that happen to soldiers is when your buddy is shot and he falls down, the first thing that you think of is, thank God that wasn't me. And that's a horrible thing to sort of think. But that's your survival mechanism sort of kicking in. And then it gets worse, because then once you've killed somebody, you've sort of crossed that line, and you kill the next one and the next one and the next one. And it's really, really, I would imagine, or have been put into position to imagine, how difficult that might be, coming home and deciding, oh, I'm just going to now be a normal citizen.
What was the reaction?
My oldest daughter has, and
How old is she?
she's 32. And the response, of course, is when you see what Jerry does at the beginning of the movie, you're just horrified. You just can't imagine that happening. And then she responded the way I think many people respond to this film, which is that after a while, you are on Jerry's side. You actually want, in some way, for him to put this crime behind him, to overcome it, to escape it, whatever. But you identify with him very, very strongly. And then, of course, when things get worse and worse and worse, you are horrified at what he becomes and where he goes. So again, I think it's what happens to people who have soldiers in their family, that even though they may not tell you what they did, you recognize that there is a change, that they're not the same person who left 18 months ago or 24 months ago, whatever it might have been, that there's a change and you don't know how to approach that change. But immediately, because they're family, you are on their side. You want to support them. I think it's a very, very complicated and catastrophic situation for anybody involved. I spoke, or have spoken, I mean, I've been to Fort Bragg and trained with, literally trained with people who were assassins, trained with people who were taught how to, what's called take a house, and which means shooting people close up. I've spoken to a number of Vietnam vets who went through post-traumatic stress disorder and talked to them about how they overcame it, or if they feel they did overcome it. I spoke to people who were on the other side, people who were living in Vietnam. I've spoken to family members of people who've been in Iraq and talked to them about how they viewed their cousins or nephews or brothers who had come back for short periods of time. Spent a lot of time listening to interviews on the television. One in particular, there was one gentleman whose face is completely distorted. I think he lost limbs, and his brother then volunteered to go over, and this first gentleman was encouraging of his brother to go over and fight. And that's the other thing that happens, is you become completely involved in, making sure that your buddies will be taken care of. It's no longer a matter of politics or morality, it's a matter of survival. And it's on one hand completely unbelievable, and on the other hand completely understandable. It's a very devastating kind of thing. Yeah, there are a number of reports that in Fort Bragg in particular, where men came home and they destroyed their families, literally. They just snap. It's a matter of, your responses to anger and frustration. If you're in a war situation, you're frustrated by that guy over there who's shooting at you, you shoot back. So what happens is, if you're in a family and someone frustrates you, you take out your weapon and you blow them away. That's on the most horrific level. On just the way we grow up, storytelling is all about avenging a wrong. I mean, what was it, the Mel Gibson movie where he's a cop, and he spends most of that movie beating up people who have committed crimes or shooting people. That's how we view justice, is killing the person who's committed the crime, or certainly harming them in some great way. And if that becomes the way you live for any length of time, then again, as unbelievable as it is, it becomes a natural response. You become the animal that we're all capable of becoming. Excusing what he does or not excusing what he does, I don't think becomes the issue. He on all levels, he's put in an untenable position. He's accused of a crime he never committed. He comes home, and because he's been accused of that crime, and because he's been dishonorably discharged, he literally is then lowered in society's eyes. And in our film, you see it literally. He's in, a car salvage dump. So it's like there are still carcasses living around him, all these rusted, old, junky pieces of equipment that no longer function, which is basically who Jerry is a piece of equipment that no longer functions. His situation with his family is not tenable at all. I mean, he's got a wife who's already looking for a way to escape this horrible situation. And so he ends up doing something just, again, unbelievable, in response to literally being lowered to the lowest possible denominator, someone who just reacts because it's over. I can't take this anymore, so here's how I'm going to end this. God and country is something that we sort of wave around in the air constantly when we go to war. I'm doing this for God and country. Francesco, when you speak to him, the director, may quote me. My retort to that is, and I hope I can say this on television, is God doesn't give a fuck, actually. You hear people, when they win football games or they win a trophy, they say, God was on my side. God doesn't really give a damn about whether you won the game or the trophy or the war, because in fact, when you say that, what you're saying is he was on our side, not on their side, or she was on our side and not on their side. It is the largest excuse and the most often used excuse for committing horrors. Is in the name of God. The holy wars were fought in the name of God. Manifest Destiny in the United States, crossing from the east to the west coast and taking as much land and killing as many Native Americans as you could, was done because it was God who said to people that this is what you're allowed to do. So yeah, I think that it's real important for us to understand that God has nothing to do with war, that in fact the God that we all seem to be praying to is exactly the opposite, that if you are someone who believes in Jesus Christ, then his message was love, not shooting or killing someone. That yes, one could argue that the God that's sort of described in the Old Testament was all fire and brimstone, but that's why supposedly he sent us his son, to sort of say, well, maybe I didn't get it right the first time, that maybe what this needs to be about is about sort of loving and learning how to live next door to one another. So yeah, I think that's a very important issue in the movie. Who, me? No.
Okay, so a religious person.
No, I think I am someone who is as political as I guess I want to be. I mean, as political as any particular artist might be. I think that politicians and governments and corporations and people who are more interested in power and money use all kinds of things to excuse bad behavior, and are the first to point the finger and saying, well, those are the bad guys and we're the good guys. And I think all that needs to sort of be refocused, and that the lens we need to be looking through in terms of how we live our lives needn't be who's the most powerful or who has the most money. It be my hope that we begin to sort of try to sort of view the world as who needs what and why. You can't live in Europe or in the United States with as much money as those two continents have amongst themselves, and go to other parts of the world where people are starving to death and think that you're doing the right thing by earning more money and more power. So my hope would be that either, well, not my hope necessarily, but I think we're either going to blow each other up and start all over again, or that we'll sort of learn the lesson and begin to sort of help one another somehow. Yes, we were in Fort Macleod in Canada, and having a dinner party actually in the motel room that I was staying in. And at the end of the dinner, I pulled out the guitar and played some pieces that I had written or I knew how to sing. And the following day, Francesco, the director, asked me if I had anything in my repertoire that would be suitable for the movie. And I said, no, not really. Most of my stuff is blues or jazz oriented. And then actually he played me, Bruce Springsteen has a song in the film. And so he played me the song that at that time he was hoping to get for the movie. So it gave me an inkling of where he wanted to take it. So the following afternoon, when he asked me did I have anything in my repertoire, I said no, and then I started making notes about my character and his backstory and why he'd come to live in this small town and what happened to him in Iraq, and then what his situation was in terms of the way he was thinking about his life now in this small town. So put a lyric together, and then that night started writing the melody. But it was the middle of the night, and so I had to whisper so I wouldn't disturb my neighbors in the motel, and ended up writing the song in the wrong key. And then, but I liked sort of the way the chords were, the structure of the song was being put together. So I then used what's called a capo to lower the key so I could sing it. So that took me about 30 hours. And then at another dinner when we were rapping in in Fort McLeod, I auditioned the song for the cast and crew to see their response, and Francesco liked it a lot, and as a result, it's in the movie.
By the way, writing a song in 30 hours for me almost unbelievable.
You know, it's funny when you're put in those kinds of positions. I think, you know, the sort of our artist kind of kicks in, and The Devil's Lonely Fire was just one of those things where, because I was sort of in the middle of it doing the movie, the images sort of began to sort of literally just play themselves out, and then because I kind of knew where Francesco wanted, how he wanted the music to sit in the movie, it was sort of a jumping off point from where I needed to start in terms of the melody and the lyric and the chord progression.
How important is music for your life or in your life? Or are you like playing in a band, or are you on tour with your music?
No, I mean it was one of those things where when I was younger, you know, in college I had a rock band, and you know, we made money on the weekends kind of thing, and when I started off in this business, I actually thought I wanted to become a recording artist, and actually went off and got a recording contract and went into a studio and tried to make what was then called an album, and then found out I hated the music business so much. It at that point was so racist and so grubby and dirty. I just thought, you know what, I will play music for the rest of my life, but I don't necessarily have to play music as my way of life. So it is my way of love, if you will. And I've been playing it, I guess, since I've been playing guitar, certainly since high school. And only recently have begun to take songwriting and playing music a little more seriously. I think now that I'm older, I think I can control how I want to do things, and because you can sort of, because of the technology these days, I can make a record in my basement if I want to, and put it out there and distribute it myself, and whether it makes a lot of money or not is not really the point. So I enjoy it a lot more.